Hi. In late 1965 or early 1966, NuTone came out with the model 2067-2068. The 2067-68 was either the second or third solid-state music intercom system NuTone had ever made. It depends on how you count the models. So the 2561 was the very first solid-state model, and that came out in 1963. And then we have the 2071, but that's a stereo music intercom system, so it belongs to actually a different category of systems than most other models do. And the 2071 is based on the 2561-62. And then we have the all-new model 2067-2068. The 2067-68 took the place of the earlier model 2057-58, which was a vacuum tube based model, but it is truly the descendant of the 57-58 because it has a lot of similar features that you find in the earlier version. So let's go over what we have here. The 2067-2068 was available in two finishes. This is the Colonial Copper finish, which is a variegated brown finish. It was also available in eggshell. Apparently eggshell was not very popular in the mid-60s because you rarely ever see them. I think I have only ever seen two of them in 40 years, so I don't think it was a big seller. The Colonial Copper being the choice of the day. You have a metal perforated mesh grill up here. The speaker is here at the top. It has a 5x7 speaker cone. All of the speakers on a 2067-2068 are 3.2 ohm speaker cones, as were the speakers on the 2071s. You have this anodized aluminum insert panel with the controls on it. On the Colonial Copper versions, this is sort of a copper finish. On the eggshell ones, this is silver. You have separate AM and FM tuner dials, just like on the earlier 2057-2058. This would have been considered a deluxe feature because you can tune your favorite FM radio station and you can tune your favorite AM radio station to listen to the ball game in the afternoon. You just switch your input between AM and FM here with the selector knob, and you don't have to retune the dials every time you want to listen to one or the other bands. Most other models, you had a single tuner dial for AM and FM, and then you would have to retune your station. So a little more advanced of a design. Here on your selector input, you have a position for phonograph. There is a RCA phono jack on the bottom of the unit down here. There's also a jack on the back of the unit, and you could have bought the optional NuTone Model 2073 in-wall fold-down record player if you wanted to, and have that connected to the system. And then you have AM, you have FM, and you have FM AFC. AFC stands for automatic frequency control. That helps prevent the tuner from drifting off station over time. AFC was a fairly new idea in the 60s, and better radio tuners had it. It helped solve the problem on sets that only have FM. You would put it on FM and you would carefully tune in your favorite station so it came in really, really clear. And then sometimes after 45 minutes, an hour and a half or so, when the set's been playing, you'll notice it kind of slightly drifts off station just a little bit, and then you've got to go back and tweak the knob to get it really clear again. When you have AFC on a tuner, it helps prevent that from happening. Why do they drift if you don't have AFC? Usually it's more of a heat related problem. As sets are on, since they're built into the walls, the components are on and they generate some heat, and over time heat affects things like transistors, and that causes them to shift. And the shifting of the transistors affects the alignment of the tuner, and that's why you have to go back to the dial, go and get it locked back in where you want it. AFC, while not a one-stop fits all solution for that kind of problem, it helped quite a bit. Then you have your master volume control. That's for the volume of the speaker built into the master station. You have your volume on-off tone control here. This would be actually what would be called a gain adjustment. The more you turn this up, the more amplification the amplifier in the set makes, and the louder the system plays. As with most intercom systems, most of the remote speakers, including the master volume, should be set 3/4 or higher, and then you adjust the gain to give you a comfortable day-to-day listening level for the music. There is an intercom, what they call an override adjustment, on the back of the set that helps increase or decrease the intercom volume when you speak on the system, because these are very simply designed systems and there is no muting of the music when you use the intercom. You're speaking over the top of the radio. The radio volume ideally drops a little bit and the intercom volume goes up a little bit, so you get preference for the intercom, but it certainly is not as good on systems they made later with muting. The tone control are these little ears behind the knob, and you just rotate it for your tone adjustment. What we used to say is you can adjust it for treble or less treble. Not a lot in the way of bass. It depends on the speakers that you install with this. Your default standard 5-inch inside remote stations are the model 2027s, but there were the optional 2021s that have 8-inch diameter speaker cones in them. And if you had the larger speaker cones, which most people didn't buy, you did have better bass response than on the smaller stations. You have one intercom switch here. You have push down to talk and push up to hear the reply. This system has what would be called later on hands-free reply to the master station, meaning that the person at the master, you could push the switch down to talk, to call to the kids, "What are you guys doing up there?" And then you could push it up to listen and hear, "Nothing, Mom." So the kids didn't have to go to the remote station and operate the intercom button on it. It would be all controlled from here. If you're talking from room to room, from remote to remote, bedroom to another bedroom, something like that, then it's like walkie-talkies. Kids push and talk, and then mom pushes and yells at them, and kids go, "Oh, gee, Mom," and then you better cut it out. I'm going to tell your dad when he gets home, and like that. So it's only hands-free reply to the master. Here is where your room control switches would poke through. The switch box assembly is installed on the wall housing. You have slide switches. There are 10 positions. You could have up to 10 stations. However, if you read the installation instructions carefully, you could actually cheat it up to 12, because station or positions 9 and 10, it says in the installation instructions that you can double up on those stations if you need to, but I'm not sure in 1966 if people were installing such large systems that you would need to do that. You have to remember, in 1966, to put in a system like this, and if you do a full-blown system with 10 stations, you're living the Jetsons lifestyle. To have an intercom at all is unusual in 1966, and to have a really, really large system, doubly unusual. The 2067-2068 uses 3-wire entry door stations. Originally, it could be the model 2006 or 2007, and then slightly later on the N2006 and N2007, and they have some type of talk switch on them, just like remote stations do. Sometimes it's a lever switch, sometimes it's a slide switch. It just depends on which version you have. There was also a version, a 2008, that had a push button switch on it. I don't see those very often. I think they might have been more expensive or just maybe not very popular because of the way they look. They had a much more modern look to them. Since it's a 3-wire door station, it is essentially the same as an inside remote, only outside the house, and it lacks any volume control. Let's say that you connect the door station to switch number 10, and the switch is in the radio intercom position, which is the bottom position. The door speaker will not only have intercom communication, but it will also play the music if the music is on. There is no, as they would come up with later on, systems that had it was a switch that would say door speaker on and off. On this system, if it was on, the music at the outside on the front porch was standard, and also in those days considered to be somewhat deluxe. And of course, this is finally at the time where we have proper outdoor patio stations. Patio stations were always, in these days, a two-piece arrangement. You would have a large 12 by 12 perforated aluminum grilled patio speaker, and down below you would have an appropriate wall control, which had the volume control and the intercom push button switch on it. They came as a package. It would be a model 2014, and you got the aluminum grilled speaker and the patio remote together as a kit. They were not available separately. If you bought the large model 2021 8-inch inside speakers, they featured what was called a breakaway panel, which is essentially the intercom control panel of the station. It came with an optional bezel that you could mount it in, and the idea was that you could take the large 8-inch inside station and mount it up high on the wall, like in the dining room or even in the ceiling. I've seen them, and put the wall control down on the wall where it was easier to access. The problem with that can be if the speaker is in the ceiling and it's 10 feet away from the wall control, it doesn't really function as an intercom, because you would have to push the button and then yell 10 feet away for someone to try to hear you, and of course that doesn't work, and nobody's going to do that. So you don't see them a lot in those days at all. One of the other downsides to the different sizes of speakers were the cost. In 1966, you could buy a 5-inch 2027 station and it was $8.50, but the 2021 8-inch inside station was a full whopping $22. I always think of my father in those kind of situations. There's no way that he's going to pay more than double for a bigger speaker, because they didn't see the value in it. Nah, the inside one is good enough. We don't need that big one. That's just way more money. In 1966, a 2067, 2068 master station had a retail price of $152. And according to the NuTone catalog, if you were to buy a suggested size system, which would include the master station, a door station, 3 inside remotes, including wall housings and wire, you would have about $195, which in 1966 was a fair amount of money. It was not an inexpensive thing to do at all. Of course, these were not going into, 1,100 square foot tract houses. These were normally going into custom homes, and I think people would step up and pay the extra for that. One of the other interesting features on this set is this local and distance FM selector switch. So we can slide it to the right and it's in distance, and you move it to the left for local. And this has to do with how the FM tuner receives the signal through the antenna that was installed during the pre-wire. Now, one might think in modern terms that when it's in the local position, you're getting the standard amount of signal that comes down the antenna like you would expect, and that all works really well. So let's say that you live out in the farmlands and you're 50, 60 miles from downtown Chicago, and you want to listen to your favorite Chicago radio station, but you can't get it very well because you're right on the fringe of the reception for that kind of station, because it's not a 50,000 watt station. It's probably only like an 8 or 9,000 watt station, so it's a little hard to get in. Modern thinking would tell you, well, you move the switch to distance and it has some kind of fancy hocus pocus electronics in it that boosts up the signal, and so I can hear my Chicago radio station. That's not how it works at all. How this works is when it's in the local position, you're getting whatever signal strength that comes down the antenna into the FM tuner. When you put it on distance, it actually adds some components into the circuitry where the signal from the antenna comes in, and it actually reduces the signal by a fair amount. I think it's about 30%. Why would you do that, would you ask? Why would they want to do that? Why would they want to cut the signal down if it's so strong? Strong stations are always good. Well, no, because you have to think about the fact that this was still in the early days of FM radio. FM radio, contrary to what people may not even think about nowadays, wasn't always around. It didn't always exist. There was a period of time when there was only AM radio and shortwave radio. There was an attempt at FM for a while, and it kind of failed. Had a lot to do with things that the government did with the bans for FM. And then later on, there was a resurgence as the people in charge of FM, mostly manufacturers like RCA and people like that, they wanted to make FM radios and they wanted to sell FM radios, but they needed to get that sorted out. But early FM tuners, the part of the set that receives the signal from the antenna, they're very easily overloaded. If the strength of the signal is too strong, let's say that you live in downtown Chicago or right outside of downtown Chicago, and you want to listen to your favorite radio station, and it's a 50,000 watt powerhouse station, the strength of the signal is so large and so strong that it will overpower the FM tuner and it won't play correctly. It won't sound right. It may be too strong to tune in. So what you need to do is you need to reduce the signal down to an appropriate level. That's what this switch does. So modern thinking nowadays is backwards of how this actually works. This was a feature that they only ever incorporated into this design. Later designs had other integrated circuitry that would help prevent the tuner from being overloaded. It was a novel approach. It was something that I'm sure some engineer thought was just a swell idea. I think it probably caused a lot of confusion, and I feel bad for the installers that had to go out and do a demonstration and explain something that seemed completely backwards to people. One of the other things that's interesting if you read an original NuTone catalog about the 2067, 2068 is they make a point of pointing out that it uses no more current than an electric clock. Now, I think that what they're addressing is the fact that the earlier model that this replaced, the 2057, 2058, which has vacuum tubes in it, on the front of the unit, it shows that it uses approximately 56 watts of power. So think of that as if it were a 56, or to make it even easier, a 60 watt light bulb. I'm sure that people were just as conscious and worried about their energy use and energy costs, how much electricity they use in their house in the mid-1960s as we are today. I think in the mid-1960s, people were not necessarily inclined to leave a 60 watt light bulb turned on all the time just for the hell of it. That's why intercom systems typically at night when you go to bed, they get turned off because they use electricity and you don't want to pay for it if you're not actually using it, so why would we leave it on? And that's the problem with tube models. Tube models use a lot of power compared to solid state, which uses virtually nothing. So now they point out the fact that since it's all new solid state, you know, it's got those newfangled transistors in it, none of this vacuum tube rubbish. Now it uses way less electricity, no more than your GE clock, which has a Telecron motor in it, which uses almost no electricity at all. So that's a real benefit. The other thing that they point out in the NuTone catalog, and I'm going to read from the catalog just to let you get the full effect of it. In a nice red box on the second page of the brochure about this model, it says, "Good news!" with an exclamation mark. Owners of NuTone tube systems models 2011, 2012, 2015, or 2016 now may convert to this transistorized master station with NuTone's new model 409 adapter kit, retailing at only $2.95. Other NuTone systems accepting stereo may convert without the 409 adapter kit. For details, see your NuTone supplier. So what does that all mean? Well, if you had a 2011, 2012, 2015, or 2016, which are the two original models that NuTone ever made, the vacuum tube based models, the master stations are a different type of design. They're much larger than this. However, they all use a very similar wall housing. In fact, let me get one and show you. This is the wall housing for our 2067, 2068. It's a metal enclosure, has a solid back, has some holes in the top for wires and things to come through, and up here in the top right-hand corner is a 110 power socket. This is referred to as a safety disconnect, so when you unplug a tube model, when you open up a tube model, it unplugs automatically so that it's powered down, so you don't kill yourself but with an electrical shock. This type of wall housing was used on all vacuum tube models of any sort that you'll ever find. They would have different mounting brackets and things based on the model, but fundamentally, this is the box they all used. The box for 2011, 2012, 2015, 2060, it's a little bit deeper than this, has different mounting points, has some differences because it was the very first original NuTone systems ever made. And what NuTone's idea always was, I'm going to put this aside, their idea was if you created systems around sort of a universal mounting box that was used on all systems, someone who was building a house, let's say in 1957, maybe could only afford a model 2011. A 2011 is an AM only model, no FM. It was the least expensive at the time. And NuTone's idea was, well, we're going to come out with the 2015, which is AM and FM, and it fits into the same box and hooks up pretty much the same way. So maybe after the people build their house and they move in, they live there for a few years, and they've got a few more bucks floating around, maybe they'll go down to their local NuTone dealer and buy a new master station and pull out their 2011 and give it to the neighbor and put in your 2015 and have AM and FM, and you'll be all set. And we could sell more sets that way and people could do an easy upgrade. I don't think that ever happened. I don't think anybody ever did that, because once you buy something, you're happy enough with it, it's paid for, you're not going to buy another one in 3 or 4 years. Average time for upgrade for most people, if they remodel their house, it's 10 to 15 years. If it's because the system is old and tired and it just needs to be replaced because they can't find anybody to fix it, oh, except for us, we're around, that's like 20, 25 years. So what NuTone was doing with their 409 adapter frame was they created an adapter frame that fit the somewhat larger wall housing for those 2 early models that they made. They only charged you $2.95 for it, which is a bargain, I think. So you could install this master station in place of either one of those other 2. This is fully compatible with the wiring. It's fully compatible with all of the original remote speakers. So you could do a really fancy transistor upgrade and you don't have to spend a lot of money. It's $152 plus $3 for the adapter. Seems like quite a deal to me. So that's enough waffling on about all the sales feature of the 2067 and 2068. So let's go ahead and look at the back side of the unit, because that's where all the real fun is. So if we flip it around like this, you can see it's actually a fairly simple design. You have your 5x7 speaker here. You have your cord with the plug-in power connection here that plugs into the power socket in the rough-in that I showed you just a few minutes ago. And then you have a chassis. And the chassis is screwed to the back of the faceplate, so it's easily removed. It's held in place with 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what you have here, which is a little hard to see because it's all sort of encased in itself, is you have one large single circuit board that's mounted inside out, because you see the back side here, and all the components are in the chassis here, because the chassis is rather deep. It's about 2.5 inches deep. It's a nice design, and also it's a very similar design to the 2057-58, which is very much like this, where you have an integral chassis assembly with a single circuit board with all of the components on it, and then all your switches and controls are all mounted to the chassis with wires that connect everything together. So it's a very similar design. One of the things about the 2067-2068, the way I look at it and the way that I explain it to people, is it's somewhat of what I call a transitional model. And what I mean by transitional model is it has design aspects of both vacuum tube design and solid state design. What you have to remember is NuTone had been making vacuum tube models for almost 10 years at this point, and there were still vacuum tube models available when this was available. There were still 2 models left that they made that you could buy. And I would imagine that was because they didn't have systems to fill the spots in the product line to replace those 2 models. And of course, you always have die-hard customers that are used to, oh, I like the sets with the vacuum tubes, that's what I've always bought, that's what I want to install for these customers. And you don't want to lose those sales because someone doesn't want to take the next step up in design. It has vacuum tube elements in it, not vacuum tubes themselves, but design elements along with transistor design elements. It's sort of a crossover. You're bridging the design part tube, part solid state. Some of the things that are tube-like are Inside here, where you can't see, there is an audio isolation transformer. Vacuum tube sets always have an output transformer. I'm not going to get into the geeky reasons why, but basically the way it works is the power from the tube amplifier goes into a transformer, which isolates it from the output to the speakers. So it induces across the transformer. That's as geeky as I'm going to get, so don't go hazy on me here. Basically, you're separating the speakers from the amplifier. They're not hooked up directly because that doesn't work in tube sets. This is designed that way also. It does have an audio output transformer in it, which is really a tube design item. The other thing is, this is a low voltage system. Even though it plugs into 110 just like a tube set would do, there is a low voltage transformer. It's actually right here inside the set, this black part right here where my finger is. This is a low voltage transformer that's incorporated into the chassis. So the 110, it goes in here, feeds the transformer, reduces it down to run the set itself. This is also somewhat of a tube-like design because some tube models have power transformers in them, although they're the backwards or opposite of this. This is a low voltage transformer, where in tube sets, it's a high voltage transformer. It takes the 110 and boosts it up to make it higher to run all the vacuum tubes and everything. One of the things that's important about this model to understand is if you have one of these and it's beginning to have problems, you don't want to leave it turned on or wait and continue to try to muddle along and use it, because if this transformer burns out, which I have seen happen because it's overloaded by failures in the circuitry, finding a replacement is really difficult. The constraint is it's not some kind of super special, hard to find voltage transformer, but it is a super special size of transformer because it has to fit here in the chassis. It has to go in this spot inside here, and common like doorbell transformers, way too big, won't fit. And so usually the only way that you can fix this is if you have a spare one of these that you can rob a transformer out of. Fortunately, it's not that much of a problem, but it's always on sets that haven't been taken care of frequently enough, or when problems first occur, and then eventually they die. Of course, you have your 5x7 speaker cone. This is larger than the speaker cone in a 2057, 2058, but it's still a 3.2 ohm speaker cone, so it has better fidelity than later models that would use a 16 ohm speaker cone or a 25 ohm speaker cone. It makes all the difference. If you take a system like this and you hook it up to like 25 ohm speaker cones, it has sort of a muddy sound and you don't really get the volume or fidelity out of it that it was designed to. As soon as you put in some 3.2 ohm speaker cones, you're all over the place on fidelity. It just sounds really nice. It has down here in this box is your FM tuner. This would be the same FM tuner that would have been used in a 2561-62 of the same time period. It's a reasonably early FM tuner. So, FM tuner design was still being developed for all companies in those days. So you can't really judge it by modern standards, but if it's aligned correctly and if the set is rebuilt properly, it won't be a problem. The 2067, 2068 was only available for a short number of years. By the time you get to 1968, it's been replaced, and it would have been replaced with the model 2090, which was also a solid state model and had similar design features, but it's an entirely new design for the late 1960s. So that's a brief overview of the NuTone Model 2067-2068. It's a very nice intercom. The last thing I'm going to say, which I say in all of the videos about this particular model, is you have to be particularly careful of the units if you ever have to remove them, because the brown plastic faceplate, or the eggshell faceplate, if that's what you have, is made out of the world's most brittle plastic. The thing that makes this particular unit, this actual one right here, exceptional is it does not have a broken faceplate. And the number of these that I see that are not broken is very few nowadays. In fact, it's to the point that when a customer needs to send one of these to us for repair, we instruct them on how to remove the chassis from the back of the unit. It's not hard to do at all, it's very simple. because the faceplate will not survive shipping. It will get broken, almost guaranteed. And I've done other videos where I've talked about this, and you just have to be extremely, extremely careful. The plastic that they use, I don't know whether it gets brittle due to age or whether it was just the nature of the plastic from those days. Maybe they made a poor choice, or maybe it was the kind of plastic they needed to use to get the type of detail in the faceplate that they have on this model. But any way you look at it, the faceplate plastic is as fragile as your grandma's favorite fine china. And one whack on the counter or anything like that, you would never even pick it up just from the top like this, like you would do most sets, because you're putting all the weight into one spot where your hand is. You have to be extremely careful with them because they will get broken, and since it's a common problem, finding an unbroken faceplate as a replacement is a really, really difficult thing to do. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give us a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.